digital was going to be the front door of the bank. When you look at your digital strategy from that perspective, it really changes how do you now take everything that was done behind a lobby door and expose that through a phone. And so that was really the premise on how we needed to build all of the framework and foundation from day one to be able to partner with all of the fintechs.
Innovation is not the sole realm of large banks and fintechs. Today, we're talking with Phil Suckow, VP of Innovation at IncredibleBank, who's helping prove that community banks can deliver outstanding digital experiences. Without massive development teams or unlimited budgets, this 60-year-old Wisconsin bank birthed its own digital brand and reimagined what modern banking looks like. Phil shares how they did it and what other community FIs can learn from their journey of bringing innovative ideas to reality. Phil, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So probably where we should start here is a little bit about your background at IncredibleBank, how you kind of got into the role that you're in now, and then we can start really talking about your approach to innovation.
Sure. So I've been with IncredibleBank now going on 15 years. Originally started in a community banking model, kind of grew up there, had the opportunity to continue to expand outside of community banking. And then after a couple years of working in the operational and training areas, came back to the branch banking as a regional manager and was able to lead that group. And then as we decided to really double down on what we felt the future of how digital was going to impact the organization, had the opportunity to kind of come over to the digital side as one of those first employees that was dedicated to really focusing on how is IncredibleBank going to focus on its digital strategy.
So the history here was your legacy as an institution. You originally, was it River Valley was the name of the institution?
Yep.
And then in what it was about 2007, 2008, you created an all digital sub brand that was IncredibleBank, correct?
Yes, in 2009, our at that time COO, now CEO, a very visionary gentleman. His whole premise of his concept was how can we continue to grow deposits outside of our footprint? And so he led at that time a crazy out of the box idea of how do you have a digital only brand on top of a bank? And so we operated that way for many years. He continued to iterate on that idea, and we expanded into now what is kind of our national niche strategies. And so we expanded that brand up until about 2015, just on the deposit side. We then started doing some national specific niche lending, like our luxury motor coach division. We've now continued to add other niches and round out the whole ecosystem of all products being delivered via the digital channel, just like if you walk into our branch. And then in 2019, we decided to really double down and focus on how do we make community banking more digital. And so we brought both the digital brand and the 50-year-old community banking brand together and brought the digital IncredibleBank only brand to the forefront.
And so in any form, does River Valley still exist, or has everything been rebranded as IncredibleBank?
Everything for our consumers has been rebranded. We still have our family owned. We're owned by two brothers. They are the second generation owners, looking to transition to the third generation. And so there's still a lot of passion around that legacy of what River Valley built as the foundation and how IncredibleBank continues to live out that mission and vision.
Okay. So it exists in some way, but really foot forward is our digital experience, everything that we've built essentially from scratch over the past 15 years is that digital channel, the digital forefront.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. So what has been the approach been? Has, you start kind of thinking about building something like this out, there's sometimes there's all or nothing buy or build. Like we go to a vendor and just lock, stock, and barrel buy, their complete solution, or we effectively build a fintech or a software development organization in house and build it out. What through this process, what have you tried? What has really been the mainstay? Like, how did you kind of get from, how did you go from 0 to 1? I guess is really the question on this point.
Yeah. So around that time that we made the choice to double down on digital, our CEO and COO were working closely with the Jack Henry leadership team. So Jack Henry is our core provider. And we really spent some significant time with them understanding what their vision of where digital was going to go. And we decided that it closely matched where we felt digital needed to continue to grow. And so we decided to really lean in and partner with them very early on when one, they had acquired the Bano digital platform. We believed that what Bano was doing was innovative at that time and was going to continue to remain innovative. And it really has provided us the framework for everything we've done with working with fintechs. So we have quite a few fintechs that we've plugged in on both the consumer side as well as the business side to help us achieve very niche specific business needs that we've had in both of our deposit acquisition strategy as well as our payment strategies.
So that's interesting that it was a little bit of a kind of acquiring the elements of it, but that really the partnership with the core provider was the key element in all this. And I will say that is not always the typical story of most financial institutions, particularly ones. So you guys, just to put things in scope, you guys are what, little under 2 billion in assets from a
Correct. Yep.
size standpoint. Yeah. So you're looking at, a non-interest expense line, budget of probably somewhere, 40, 50 million, something like that. Um, you know, Thinking about like that's the level of resource that you have available to you to kind of take that approach. What what were like the key, I guess, capabilities? What were the things that really mattered along this path that you saw as, either what Jack Henry was bringing to the table or what you were bringing in from the outside from, from other fintechs?
So we originally started that we needed to make sure that our leadership team's vision of where digital was going matched our partners' strategy. And so what we really found is that the the leadership at Jack Henry Digital very closely aligned with how they saw the future of where digital and physical needed to come together. That digital was going to be the front door of the bank. That was lockstep, uh, the lockstep vision that our leadership team had. That at the end of the day, the future bank door is opened by a mobile device, and that's how the customer of future generations could really view their bank. And so when you look at your digital strategy from that perspective, it really changes how do you now take everything that was done behind a lobby door and expose that through a phone. And so that was really the premise on how we needed to build all of the framework and foundation from day one to be able to partner with all of the fintechs that were going to help round out how each financial institution designed their strategy. They could plug in any fintech that they felt was going to help give them a competitive edge.
So, one thing when you begin talking about developing capabilities and certainly a strategy is the extent to which, the customer has a vote, that you're tying in some sense of either, unmet needs or pain points that you're getting from your customers. How did that play into your process or how you developed your roadmap or how you were putting RFQs together, like whatever that was that, kind of closed that loop. How did you work that?
We had developed what we call the Incredible Customer Experience or ICE framework, which we later trademarked. But really, what it dictated for us is what are the non negotiables around how we want that customer experience to operate from what our employees will deliver every time. And so we look at how do we carry that all the way through the interaction into the digital space. And so, what ICE allowed us to do is we developed customer feedback loops. So, we have a wide variety of interactions where we survey our customer. It could be a transaction that they ran in the branch, it could be a digital deposit that they completed, it could be an interaction with our call center. And so, we take all of this feedback and serve that up to our executive management and division leaders to be able to get insight from the customer on either where were they successful, where did that customer have a pain point, or did the customer provide a feedback on something that we could do to make better. And then that feedback is held accountable to all the way up to our management team. So if there's an opportunity to reach back out to the customer to either improve and gather more feedback, we expect that to happen and manage our employees to that expectation that we take the feedback very seriously and engage with our vendors or partners on how we could make that onto a roadmap from a technical development. Or was it something that maybe was a internal process or procedure that we need to relook at to be able to deliver a better or more incredible customer experience?
So the survey process, is that something that you're running inside, or do you have a third party doing that for you?
So the our director of business intelligence designed and executes that, and then she ensures that all the feedback loop is constantly up and running, and that it's getting to both the management and impacted managers.
So next thing, again, thinking through this kind of process, and particularly when so much of what you're doing is more the composition of the services and the capabilities. A big part of this is the boring version is vendor management, but it's really more finding the right partners that are aligned with what you're doing. And obviously, you've bet big on Jack Henry, and that's worked out for you. But for other capabilities, for the fintech integrations that you're doing, what are you looking for there? Like, what is the process or the things that are really critical in that process to make sure that, you have a vendor that's gonna work out for you? And maybe an example of that.
So, one of the things we developed very strategically was both we call it our emerging technology committee that involves management and executive level. And that's where we kind of bring a lot of what we consider more strategic discussions of where partners are going, where are we researching and spending our limited R&D time and energy. And we developed a scorecard that very highly tied to the bank's strategic items as well as our long-term goals and objectives. And so every fintech partner that we meet with gets graded on that same scorecard. And then we look at, based on where they fall, who makes sense to be able to partner. It gives us a really great way to be able to say, rank similar vendors that are playing in the same space, as well as where should we spend time with somebody that they're both strategic, but is there one of them that's even more strategic? So a great example, we've been doing a lot of work in the AI space over the last year and a half. And so a lot of those scores come in very high to the bank because we added some AI specific strategies that the bank had. Whereas initially on our scorecard 3, 4 years ago, and as we were first penning our first AI strategy in around 2020, we didn't have that as a condition on the scorecard. And so it wouldn't have been anywhere near as a strategic priority to be looking at somebody and what was under the hood from an AI engine perspective.
So this process, where does it sit in the organization? Is this something that's underneath you? Is it underneath like the CIO? Like, from an organizational standpoint, you kind of begin to think about, you know control and influence and that aspect.
So I lead it, but I report up to our COO, CIO.
Hmm. So that's the same person has both roles.
Correct. Yep. So
Okay. And
Kathy
do you have
goes,
a separate chief risk officer?
yes.
Okay.
And I work hand in hand with our SVP of Enterprise Risk Management. There is not really anything that I don't do that she hasn't been involved with from a very early stage. So she also, our enterprise risk management team also manages vendor management. And so all the due diligence process and everything. But we've built a relationship where we also have a vendor management committee that also meets and looks at what are the current risk matrices and things that are impacting from a contract, legal, vendor perspective. And I'm also involved on that, even though I'm a high user of it, I'm able to help influence where do we see some of these more unique vendors and what we need to be able to do with them impacting the overall risk of the org. Uh, but I wouldn't be able to do what I do if our chief risk officer and his team was not also willing to kind of take a look at the possible.
But back to the execution piece. So you reporting directly into the COO, CIO, single-hatted role there. Is that also where essentially all of the R&D and implementation work gets done? Like do you have a PMO, like a PMO office or a PMO process?
So we have a PMO process, not a dedicated PMO. Uh, that structure also lives underneath the office of the COO, CIO, not directly on my team. We really operate as a matrix organization. And so a lot of what we do is influential leadership and things that help us all move forward. But we have very strategic meetings every 2 weeks to kind of plan out where are the priorities of the projects that are coming through the org. And so we have a large management team that really takes a look at that from both the implementation, the IT, the risk and compliance worlds to be able to ensure we're working on the right things when we need to be working on them.
But it's interesting, and I would say I don't know if this is becoming more typical or not, but it certainly seems to be rare today that this idea of operations and the IT assets that are getting it done kind of gets single threaded under a single executive, particularly from budgetary and control standpoint, because you think about there's an element of this that's tied to speed and agility. How not just quickly from a time standpoint, but how much effort is put in place to doing things that are outside of the technology, just like the change management aspect of things. And I think what's not largely appreciated in many organizations is how much inertia there is around that. And like anything you can do to kind of take some of the friction out from a process standpoint makes a tremendous deal. And one that compounds over time. And I think if we dug into this a little bit more, we would find some really interesting examples from what you guys have been doing for the past 15 years.
And that's really the premise of where my role evolved to be where it is today. So a lot of what I focus on is our management team is obviously looking at the 3 and 5 year plan from an executive level. And then I work behind them on really the what's coming in that 12, 18, 24 months and ensuring that we're doing everything from who is the lay of the landscape of possible vendors to what are the requirements that our business unit needs and then help surface kind of the top three for the business unit. So they're not having to go figure out the entire landscape of who's playing in X space. They're able to now just kind of look at, okay, we know these are the top. We know we can integrate to them. We know, or at least we have high confidence from a due diligence standpoint, we're not going to run into anything. And so then I can help do all that upfront work. So that way, as the business unit comes in, we've already gotten through a lot of that heavy lifting, come alongside them to help do a business case, provide insight into kind of implementation, and then work with them alongside the implementation process. Uh, so that way, they're some of where that uncomfortable innovation happens, they're not having to spend as much time understanding the uncomfortable. They're able to operationalize and really focus on where their expertise is of how do I take this idea and bring it to market.
So you mentioned something there that I think is key, that is often a stumbling block for many organizations, and that's just if we want to like couch this under just like research or being able to see like what is out in the marketplace, and even getting to like the short list of capabilities, let alone identifying vendors. What's your process? How do you do that? That kind of goes from, hey, here's the thing that we've maybe identified through our survey or our feedback or our customer interview standpoint, to here's the short list of partners or vendors that we potentially want to work with. How do you kind of bridge the gap between those two things?
One of the things that I leverage is our VC fund. So we're part of the Bank Tech Venture Group. So whenever we have a specific opportunity that we're looking to solve from a technology standpoint, I'll engage their team with what it is the problem that we're trying to solve. Uh, Fortunately, I've been in the space long enough. I have a pretty good Rolodex of my own. And so when we're working with the bank tech team, we're able to kind of compare notes on who do we both know in the space that solves these problems or close to those problems. We're able to kind of collaborate and say, well, have you talked to this founder or that founder? And that really helps round out kind of a list of maybe I knew of 8 in the space, they knew of 8 and 5 of them crossed over. But we're able to then collaborate on here's the others that are also at the table. And that really is a great way for us to understand the ecosystem larger than where we've played before. Um,
So
I,
tell me, let me just say, let me just ask a couple questions on bank tech. So they're a traditional venture capital firm.
so they are a venture capital firm focusing on community banks and fintechs.
And your involvement from Incredible Bank's relationship, are you like a limited partner with them, or just somebody who goes to them to talk to their portfolio companies?
We are a limited partner, and so we work with their team both on the partners that are in their stack, but then we've really leaned into them as another outlet to help understand the fintech ecosystem. And they're more than willing to share who they're talking with that helps solve your problems. And so we really lean into that conversation with them to be able to understand who's all in different spaces of fintech.
And I guess the other question, like other limited partners, are they like other community banks that you work with, network with, et cetera? Or is this one of these like, well, they're kind of a competitor, and so we have this kind of co-opetition relationship with them? Or like how does that work for you?
We really don't have any concerns about the community banking space and being in competition. We really think that at the end of the day, we're all in competition with the bigs. And there's so much opportunity for all of the community banks to partner with fintech and to execute on their strategy to go attack another part of where the big regionals, super regionals are. That there's plenty of opportunity for all of us. And it's not a, hey, you're in my back door of the North Woods of Wisconsin and we can't partner with the same fintech, because at the end of the day, how I leverage that fintech is going to probably be very different than how you leverage that fintech. And so we really look at it as how can we all work together to be able to go after the big banks?
Got it. Interesting, because you see a similar model in credit unions with how they organize QSOs and kind of get into things from like a co-investment standpoint. It has a very different structure than that, and tends to have less of the competitive issues around it. But it's interesting that even for a player like you that has several national product lines that's out there, you're competing with a completely different set of banks than necessarily a similar size institution that maybe even is like regionally near you.
Mhm. My strategy on that side, though, has always been um, a fellow innovator I rather have as a friend versus an enemy. And so I really look at how can I extend myself and help be a connector, whether it is a CEO or founder that's maybe got a unique solution that I don't know is going to fit with me, but I'm networked and been talking with somebody else in a bank in Colorado. How can I hand them an opportunity to maybe solve one of their business challenges? And so I really look at it as that network effect, that how can I help my peers that are in the same space solve some of the challenges, so that way hopefully when they come across something that I'm not aware of, they'll have the same pay it forward mentality of, hey, I know that's a problem that Phil at Incredible Bank has shared he's trying to figure out.
So you've kind of gone down this path of essentially developing, digital experience in conjunction with partners, but developing it from scratch in house. You certainly your own brand identity, having that largely become the brand identity of the entire bank. You've talked a little bit about, what you're looking at today, particularly from AI use cases. Where do you kind of see this going? Just this general thread of innovation in banking. Like, what are you looking to do, or maybe what is the thing that you wish existed? That you could find out there that would just scratch that itch for you, or solve one of those key pain points for your customers.
There are so many answers I could give you because it just depends on the business need that we look for. I think one of the biggest things we're focusing on right now is really how we can have more faster payments but protecting from the fraud aspect. And so we're working with a couple different opportunities right now, kind of in that fraud space, leading up to some of the things that we want to do from our payment strategy. We know the framework we have to have in place to protect our customer, as well as the bank, have to be more mature than where they are today before we start to expose those. And so that's where we've spent a considerable amount of time the last few months, and we're going into 2025. We plan to spend some additional time and resources, but really the it serves the bigger strategy to how do we help that customer be able to move their money more easily than they can today.
And certainly an area that's getting a lot of attention and investment and resulting innovation. So I think you're not alone on that point, particularly from the difficulty of the problem to solve. So Phil, this has been really interesting to hear your approach and what you're doing, and particularly your partnerships outside of the bank. If people want to learn more about you or your approach, or more about Incredible Bank, where can they go to learn more?
They can connect with me on LinkedIn, or you can feel free to open an Incredible Bank account. I've been known that with different shout outs from people, that to be able to reach out and do the onboarding myself, to be able to help give them what does that experience look like when we're able to deliver a very personalized, and you can actually have a specific person engage with with you once you've opened your account.
And we'll include links to both of that, and to Bank Tech as well in the show notes. So, Phil, thanks again for being with us today.
Perfect. Thank you very much for having me.